Palworld 1.0 is the perfect time to start a brand new journey, especially now with a myriad of new additions and quality of life changes adding a fresh coat of paint to the early game. So you know the drill, we're going to dive right in with the biggest tips on how you can also have the perfect start in Palworld 1.0. Now, for those of you who played before but don't want to miss out on your best pals that you worked so many hours on creating, don't forget that the global Palbox lets you transfer them between any of your saves. This tech unlocks at merely level 3, it's really inexpensive too, plus your pals will scale down to your current character's level while still retaining all of those amazing stats you worked for. Just keep in mind though, they may feel a bit strong at this stage, which is why personally I stuck to only taking back my base worker pals for now. From this point on, your journey actually continues quite similar to how you remember it. It's just that along the way we got cool new additions to become even stronger. So one of the first things I do from the spawn point is I'm going to backtrack a little bit just like before and grab this treasure chest right here. There's a pretty decent chance for us to get a mega sphere from it. We're going to actually use that for a very important pal in just a little bit. For the time being though, we're going to focus on gaining as much XP as possible, and one of the new changes added with 1.0 is that the capture bonus for pals has been dropped to just 5. So not only is this going to be a great source of extra XP and crafting materials, but every time you complete one of those capture bonuses, you're also going to get a Mimog effigy. Eventually, you can bring this to a statue of power to boost up your character's stats. This one in particular will increase your movement speed, so that's going to be extremely important, especially as we're going to be moving to dungeons later on. In terms of new pals, I also recommend grabbing some of the new ones added with 1.0. Paparai now appears in the starting zone as well, and this is amazing at providing you 10% to melee damage, which you can boost up with higher condensation levels, but it's also going to be the lumbering version of the Kativa, so it's really great if you want to chop down trees automatically with them at your base. For even more extra bursts of damage, I highly recommend getting some daydreams. They do spawn during nighttime, but literally they appear near the player whenever they are in your party. You don't even have to have them out of the spheres. So if you want to, you can definitely run with a whole team of 4 or 5 daydreams all spawning at the same time. They don't get damaged since technically they aren't out of the spheres, but they do contribute with dark damage every about like 5 to 10 seconds. Very good bursts even in some of the upcoming boss fights. However, by far the most important pal you want to get early on is going to be Chillet. The moment you reach level 10, I highly encourage you to go south of the Fort Ruins and take on the alpha boss encounter and capture it with the mega sphere that we got from the start of the video. This is going to now be your main carry for quite a while, and is also going to be one of the fastest ground mounts that also happens to give you access to swimming. Now from this point on, we're almost ready to select our first base location. However, on the way we have a couple more things that Pocket Pair added for us, so I recommend following the main story for a little bit, at least until you reach the small village right here in the windswept islands. That's because once you get the extra XP from there, you're just a drop away from the watchtower nearby. So these are newly added mechanics in the game. Virtually every major island will have it, and if you want to get at the top, it's very simple. There's actually a gust of wind at the bottom that will bring you there instantaneously. But if you activate this, not only is it now a fast teleportation point, it will also reveal that whole section of the map and even show any point of interest surrounding it, making exploration that much better. Second of all, another thing that Pocket Pair added are these hacking towers, and it just so happens that one of them is actually very close by to our watchtower. So from this point on, we're going to descend. There's also an enemy camp here you can farm for some extra XP and a pal, but once you get to the hacking towers, these are extremely useful. The minigames here are typically very easy, either complete a hack or take down an enemy. And once you go inside, you're going to get extra XP, but even more important, brand new schematics. And some of these can actually be extremely strong. For example, I got this really awesome tier 3 purple schematic for a pelt armor and the headpiece, which are significantly better than anything else I have up until now, but are also inexpensive and I didn't have to fight any boss to grab the schematic. However, you will find even better options for the new accessories. There are tons of them and they tend to give up to even 3 bonus stats. Imagine having like a thermal shirt baked into it with all of the resistances, but then also getting some extra bonuses to your damage or HP and even to your pals. That is how strong some of these pendants and accessories can be, so be on the lookout for them as well. But with that out of the way, we're finally ready to settle our first permanent base location, and since the story brought us here anyway, my favorite new location is going to be, well, a pretty familiar one, which is just south of the wind-swept island watchtower, again on this side of the map. The main reason for that is because there are about like 6 or 7, if not even more, of those ore nodes, and one of the things that changed with 1.0, or maybe even prior to that if I remember correctly, is that our ore mining site will now only get unlocked at level 24, meaning that you really don't want to miss out on the ore nodes. This has plenty of them, it's in a really good secluded spot, but there are others if you want to check them, like for example the one right across the Chillet boss encounter can still work just as well. Just make sure that you don't miss out on the ore. However, there's another reason why we want this location, and that is because we have 2 very convenient dungeons literally at the bottom of the same cliff. And this brings us to point number 7, absolutely jump into dungeons as soon as possible. Virtually every single one of them has been remade, and especially early on dungeons can actually be simple treasure rooms with no enemies inside, but still filled with a ton of very useful rewards, treasure chests, even skill fruits, and other resources. However, be on the lookout to the chests at the end of these dungeons, as well as the ones that contain bosses, because at the end, they will actually have a very high chance to give you some of these vital remedies. So when you consume them, they only apply to your character, but they provide permanent stat increases to stuff like HP, work speed, and they seem to be the equivalent of 1 skill level. So if I were to consume that vial, you're going to notice that my HP jumped from 740 to 840, which is literally the equivalent of 1 character level worth of skill points. So that is actually really useful, but work speed and other stats can also be increased this way. In addition to this, locations like dungeons are one of the best sources of making money early on because they are filled with a ton of cave mushrooms and lotus flowers. And what we can do with those flowers is go back at the same small settlement where the story brought us and sell them right here at the main vendor. As you can see, we can easily make 10, 20k, even 30k plus gold, which is going to be very helpful early on to buy some of the other resources in case you're too lazy to farm for them. In addition to this, many of the early game dungeons also seem to spawn a lot of Turtacles. I highly recommend you grab at least one of them because their partner skill, reduces your ore weight by up to 80%, which is absolutely crazy. So just to show you how big of a difference that makes, especially early on, we can take this almost 1,000 weight ore, and when we bring it to our inventory, it's going to be just like 300. So that is going to make it easier for you to grab a lot more ore and go back at the base, especially since dungeons are filled with a ton of very large Paldium ore nodes that you can easily mine, at the very least until you get the stone quarry and also the crusher. Anyway, let's keep on going with even more tips to get even stronger pals and specifically focusing on their abilities. One of the things you're going to notice in the open world now is that you can randomly stumble upon up-and-coming pal trainers. Literally other people with their own pals that may even challenge you to a quick duel. But here's the catch, you can, in fact, capture their own pals. The main advantage here is that they may actually feature pals that don't even normally spawn in the current region you're in. Like for example, I got this Serpentera from it very easily. I was very happy because normally I would have to go to a different region to grab it in the first place. Very useful if you're going with a mud build like some of the ones we covered before. Next tip is going to be about fishing. I highly encourage everybody to unlock the beginner fishing set the moment you hit level 15, and then at 22 to also grab the bait. You should already get bait from other sources as you capture pals too, but literally fishing, as boring as it may sound, is one of the best both early and late game methods of getting some of the best pal stats in the game, including even early on rainbow stats like the tier 4s. So just to show you with this purple bad boy in the background, yes, the fishing minigame is going to be a bit more difficult, but once we do grab it, it gave us Lurker at level 17, which is an insane stat to have for water pals, and you can get some of the others which are maybe even better. Even if you go for some of the lower level versions, you can still get something good like the tier 3 Serenity, which was one of the best for Xenolod until recently. And if you go and find the green variants, those are actually going to be the best and give you the highest chances at getting the rainbow stats. On a similar note, I also recommend dealing with the black market merchant, especially the one near the church area here in the red zone. That is because if you go to his location, eventually you can capture him too, but yeah, pretty much every hour or so, he resets his stash of sellable pals. Like, he got a Hell Zephyr right here, which I'm very tempted to purchase, but you know, you may get something with a very strong stat, or maybe you will get something that's super early on. He even sells one of the new pals, which is basically this guy called Elgrove. This is going to be a very strong pal to have. You can get it at about level 25, but it's almost as good as a Mammal Rest, 10 levels earlier than that, and it gives you a massive damage boost, transforming your attacks in grass type attacks. Similarly, if you manage to find any traveling merchants anywhere, you can actually capture them if you bring them to low enough HP. You can actually capture humans in this game if you forgot about it, and this lets you then put them back at your base so that you can always have access to their stash and the sellable inventory without having to travel anywhere else. Back at the base, in terms of organizing it a lot better, keep in mind that now we have the option to easy bulk storage. Let's say you got a ton of inventory and maybe you're on cooldown with your grappling hook and don't want to travel all the way to those boxes in the background. What you can do now is press this button and you can literally stash from far away everything back in its inventory. Of course, you first need to place the item so that the game knows where to send it initially. Like in the case of this cloth, if I put it here, I can go further away and then I can bulk store it, and as you can see, it travels there instantaneously. You can even set up exclusion lists for items that you don't want to get teleported to the boxes, especially when it comes to Pal Spheres or other consumables you always need. Besides this, you will also use the Crusher a lot more than before. Once you unlock it at level 8, yeah, you're going to be missing on a lot of fiber and Paldium in the new update. You will need tons of it now, so you're going to want to use this to break down the basic stones and wood that you can farm by default, also from the early on quarries you can unlock. That is because you get brand new recipes to craft planks, such as the wooden boards over here, but you will notice that both these as well as the regular wood will go up in rarity. So while early on we have the regular version, eventually mid-game you're going to move on to the hardwood, which is specific to the volcanic and the ice regions plus the desert area, and then the Sunreach Isles and some of the brand new zones will eventually also give you the mythical wood. But for the time being, many recipes will use this, so Crusher just became a lot more important. Besides this, rescuing pals is more important than ever. Not only will you unlock pals in many of the strongholds that enemies have, you're going to notice that there are new strongholds that appear all around the map. Now, pretty much every enemy faction kinda has its own theme going on and plays differently compared to before. But if you rescue those pals from inside, you're also now going to get a brand new item, which comes in the form of these little kinship peaches. They are extremely useful because they boost the trust stats on any of the pal you apply them to, and trust is another mechanic that further boosts the stat of that specific pal. The higher it is, the better its stats are going to increase. For those of you who have been missing in action for a very long time, a long while ago Pocketware added monitoring stands. This is going to make it easier for you to designate the workload all around your base. Let's say, for example, you really hate the fact that maybe some of your gathering NPCs are doing something else, like, I don't know, logging or not being in the right spot. What you can do is go to this location and literally assign where the pals get to work in, depending on the facility you've built, without having to manually pick them up and throw them like how it was in the old days. In case you don't want to designate them to a specific station, but also don't want them to do just everything, you can also apply a different menu where you can disable some of their work suitabilities. Let's say, for example, in the case of my Noclum, I don't want him to do any mining for now. I only want him to do transporting, so I can disable the mining and leave the other one open. But it goes the same for everything else. If there's one particular instance you don't want them to commit to, simply disable it and they will do all of the others that are still active. Pal condensation also got a buff, or well, depending how you look at it, it's easier to condense pals than ever before. You no longer need 100 pals on the fourth and final stage. 48 is all that is needed, so this drastically reduces the number of needed pals to max out their star rating at 4 out of 4. Predator pals now also get to spawn literally anywhere in the open world. They no longer have fixed spawn positions in patch 1.0, meaning that your journey may be a lot more dangerous than ever before, but they are still very useful to defeat. They provide giant pal souls and also the predator cores that go into many of the high-grade recipes, like many of the pouches and many of the very strong like melee weapons do use them as an ingredient. And last but definitely not least, yeah, in terms of the breeding farm as well as many of the other ancient technologies, they only get to unlock if you also now defeat the specific tower bosses at the different points in the main story. Like for example, in the case of the breeding farm at level 19, you also need to defeat the second tower of the Free Pal Alliance. Anyway, that about concludes today's video with some of the tips for a perfect start in Palworld 1.0. Do let me know in the comments if there's anything else different that you've done. In the meantime, if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to comment, like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.